please, that'd be brilliant. So we're avoiding any background interference. Really warm welcome to you all. We've got nearly 100 people booked on, so I'm presuming that lots of people are still going to arrive in the next few minutes. So it's really, really great. I know we haven't met for a little while, and there's been some changes along the way. So tonight is a really great opportunity for us to get together and talk about that, as well as the other things lined up on the agenda. So hopefully you all know me. I'm Alison Jeffrey. I am no longer early years lead though. I have early years within my remit, but I'm now head of curriculum and literacy. And we'll explain a little bit more about those changes, as I said, as we go along tonight. We are going to be joined by Amelia in a minute as well, who's going to be talking to us about the education strategy. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to say hi to those colleagues of mine that you're familiar with. So Sam Davies is here. She is recording tonight's session. So please be aware that tonight's session is recorded so that we can share it with those unable to attend this evening. I think there's Joe and Nikki in the background as well. Give us a wave. Hello.
Hello.
So familiar faces as well. So yeah, hopefully that is reassuring to everybody. Let's move on. Tonight is just a normal Teams meeting, so you can contribute. Obviously, people have had their cameras on already, which is lovely. It's great to see people's faces. Just to kind of keep it in check, because we've only got an hour and a half, if you could keep yourselves on mute, put your hand up if you'd like to contribute. If you could keep your videos off just at the start, that would be great, just because we're sharing some slides and we want to make sure that everybody can read all the words on those. If you would like to put anything in the chat, if you prefer not to speak, that's absolutely fine. We will have Joe, Nikki and co monitoring all of those questions or queries coming in. Obviously, like normal, we'll try and answer as many questions and hear as many views tonight. This is the Early Years Partnership, so it is your opportunity to have your say and contribute to the bigger issues. And then we will have some frequently answered questions, if appropriate, sent out afterwards. But certainly the recording of this and the slides to accompany will come out afterwards. Okay, so agenda for this evening. As I said, Amelia's joining us. I think she already has, to talk about the education strategy. We're both going to then talk about the education partnerships and skills and inclusion, actually, and the support for you as a sector now and into the future, and what that looks like for those of you who are still unsure. I'm going to do a quick update in terms of the funding rates, the hourly rates for 23-24 that I can share with you tonight. And then we're going to have a few partner updates tonight on the agenda already. We have the Early Years Send service, we have the Early Years Alliance and Take Art. So if there are other partners joining us, we hopefully will have opportunity for them to give us a quick update at the end, and then any other business questions, and finishing promptly at 6 tonight. Okay, so I'm going to hand over firstly to Amelia. She's going to just give you an update as to where we're at with the education strategy. Good evening.
Hello, everyone. I guess I'm just going to have to share my screen, aren't I, Alison?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing mine.
Sorry, folks, here's where the magic happens. Just a moment. So you'll be aware, and at this point, I just want to give a really big shout out to Rachel Parrish. So Rachel Parrish has been contributing to a group of colleagues who have been working on an education strategy for some time. I'm trying to think how long that's been. We've been part of that conversation. Started at the beginning of January, so I guess it's about a year, isn't it, Rachel?
Yeah, at least that. Yeah, a year and a bit now.
So really, really grateful for Rachel's contributions. And we've met, so I think we've had representatives from every phase, from different types of provider, from including early years schools, colleges, trusts, and governors. So it was quite a varied group of professionals, different types of school, different age ranges for children, different parts of the county. So we've been meeting as a group since January last year. And the group has kind of ranged freely over many topics. And I'll just say, for the record, it's huge thanks to Rachel and colleagues, but they are not to be held accountable for what's in the strategy, because we've very much taken their advice and then sort of taken it from there. So very much contributors, but if you don't like it, it's not Rachel's fault. But hopefully there will be things that you are supportive of in where we've got to. The other thing I would say is that this is very much a work in progress. So you'll be looking at it today because we want you to have advanced sight of the kind of things we're talking about. But by the time it comes out of the sausage machine, of everyone having had a look at it, it's probably going to look a bit different. And that's because you've got so many people who feel passionately about education, who come from different perspectives and are all involved in shaping it. So I'm sharing you our kind of initial thoughts. We have a professional organization that is supporting us to look at the data and the evaluations. We have that independence in what we're saying. We are, as we said, consulting with many stakeholders. So we will certainly be sharing the finished document with you as soon as we can. The first thing that I want to share is about the challenge that we face. And this is very much a challenge for all of us. There's a really big we in this. But the difficult thing that we need to engage with is that Somerset's not in a good place. I think we all had some concerns about some parts of children's outcomes before the pandemic. That was in 2019. But there was no formal assessment for a period of time. The government then published children's outcomes for 2022. And what was clear was that even in those areas where we had previously been stronger, there'd been a really sharp decline. And that's a really, really difficult thing for us all to engage with. Some of these you might be much more familiar with, some of them you might be less familiar with. But the one that you will know best is the good level of development. That's all of your good work. Unfortunately, that is now below national. In the past, it was above. And it has declined, but that's the same picture we're seeing across the piece. So Key Stage 1 is still above national for all pupils, but disadvantaged pupils is now below, and Key Stage 1 overall has declined. Key Stage 2 was below, it's now significantly below national, both for all pupils and disadvantaged, and is in decline. Progress 8, that's how we measure GCSEs. That's in decline, it's now minus 0.26 provisional, but that's still very, very low. And Attainment 8 is also in decline, minus 3.3 points below national. That's again provisional, but very low, in decline, and puts us at the bottom of the Southwest. And I don't think any of that is a coincidence when we see, and actually this was November, I think we were in the top 10 in November, we're now in the top 5, not in a good way, because we were in the top 5 for the number of inadequate schools. So that's all just a very, very difficult picture for education. And that's something that is asking us to really reflect hard, and importantly that we are not, and I don't think anyone in education is complacent, but that everyone, and I mean across the whole of Somerset, not just people in education, really put shoulders to the wheel to say we need to effect some change. Because it's not just one poor year, it's not just one organization, it's not just the pandemic or some other reason. It's widespread, large-scale, systematic underachievement affecting all pupils and children across many schools and settings over many years. And I think none of you will feel that it's okay for Somerset children to be left behind. And as the children's workforce, we need to be on the forefront of seeing that change. We also know that one of the things that's been, a factor in the county has been conflict complacency from some parts, and an inability to take difficult decisions and prioritize. And that's not any individual, it's our culture, it's the totality of us and how we have been together. So now it's about how do we do that differently? It's about compromise, it's about honesty. And I know that certainly some of our most frank and open and honest colleagues are in the early years sector, but also painful choices. And it's one of those ironies, isn't it? And though you'll know that, if you've ever been in an institution where things have got difficult, it's the institution where things are the hardest who have to take the hardest choices. So, this is about having a plan, but even more importantly, it's about us doing things together and focusing on a plan together. One of the things that we've just looked at is to understand why. And this is one of the things we've asked our external partner to challenge us on and make sure that we're getting things right, because it's really important that we understand the why. So we've had a look at what Somerset is like, and some of this you will know very, very well. We are a rural county. That means that it can be isolating because of our geography, because of the big spaces in between us, and the fact that, in a lot of places that you haven't got the amenities, and sometimes a nursery or a school is the only thing in a village, isn't it? And you will know as well as, as anyone, about how connectivity can be really difficult, whether that's digital or it's not having the bus route or the road or the railway. But also, and I don't know if you knew this, I certainly hadn't heard it spoken about, but our towns are polarized, because in all of our mid-sized towns, all our towns are mid-sized, but our largest towns for Somerset, we have some of the richest people in the country and some of the people with the lowest incomes in the country, and they're living really quite near to each other. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we have almost double the national average of pupils who then go into the private school or the independent sector. But what's happened, that's just who we are, that we are other counties who are like that, other parts of the country that are like that, in talking to places like Suffolk or Cumbria or Lincolnshire, very familiar. But if you think about what's happened certainly over the past kind of 6, 7, 8 years, even the past decade, there have been things that have made things more difficult. In the school sector, academization has really fragmented the sense of being together. The trusts, there's not very many strong trusts. The local authority has had real financial pressures. I know that's something we've talked about as a group often, but also performance pressures. And I think it's really important to say to all of you that we're at a moment where we, as an organisation, are holding up our hands to say we haven't got things right. Mistakes have been made, and we have let people down. We've also, people have been, very very quick to say, actually, there have been some really great things from the local authority, but that's not the totality of the picture, is it? And some things, haven't been that great. In the school sector, we have 3-tier islands, the 2-tier, 3-tier thing. You know very well about the declining birth rate, about the issues around underfunding, and about the impact of the pandemic. So all of those things have kind of piled in. And what we've seen is that the support infrastructure has got weaker. That's something I want to talk about today, and Alison will be picking up on this later. And a lot of our leaders in education, including, some of you perhaps, have ended up feeling very isolated, that some of their protections have been taken away, and that you get this culture, which is, we describe in social care terms as kind of fight or flight response. And also the capacity then reduces for improving education outcomes. So pardon the kind of coloured picture here, but if and the local authority, in a lot of extent it has been the local authority, if they withdraw their support, if leadership doesn't, it doesn't show that they care, if it's not on their priority list, but not just from the local authority, from the county as a whole, this protection starts to be taken away. And then in our area, it's very easy to become isolated, isn't it? Because that's what Somerset is like, but that isolation then increases, and those things are very anxiety inducing. Now, in school sector, you've had a little bit of impact from trusts, but that's been very small. That's certainly not, provided support, much in early years. And for schools as well, academization has been perceived as a threat. I would say in early years, while the funding has gone up in schools, in early years, actually the funding and some of those financial pressures has just continued to spiral and spiral. And we've seen, the big decrease in childminders, for example. And all of those things create a perfect storm of anxiety. And one of the things we know about anxiety is different from stress. Actually, stress, as long as it doesn't get to be too great, sharpens you up, makes you go, makes your brain kind of whirl and you're on it. But anxiety impacts negatively on your working memory, on your cognition. Actually, it slows you down. It makes it harder to cope. It makes it harder to think. And what you have then is this interaction between anxious adults and anxious children. And I would say that this probably escalates as children get older. But this is about us as human beings, because that anxious adult has less emotional resilience. And so does the child. So the child finds it harder to behave, and the child finds it harder to create that calm, consistent environment. The adult also finds it harder to navigate the system, to access support. They're feeling that overwhelm. And the child is finding it harder to learn. So their quality of education is declining. That whether it's a school or a setting, you'll be in the same position. You see outcomes decline. You get that sense of failure, but also the behaviour incidents escalate. And I think that's primarily, we think about that in schools around exclusion and how schools feel about that. But you can see those same issues in any culture. Though the impact of that obviously increases as the child gets older. So I'm just going to pause there for a second and just say, do you recognize any of that? Does that look familiar to you in any way? Do you think we've got that right?
You want to put your hands up, anybody, or put some things in the chat? That would be really, really great. Got a hand up from Becky. You want to bring yourself off mute, Becky? You're still on mute, Becky, just so you're aware.
Reporting service. Hello, can you hear us?
Oh,
we
yeah,
we
can hear
Yeah,
you.
hi. Yeah, just putting a hand up just to say we do recognise. You can sort of certainly see through the chart you've done with the adult and the child, anxious adult and the child, and how that circle and cycle can form. You can see it, you can relate to it, you can see it in a lot of practitioners, and I don't think our setting is the only one. I think from talking to others, we're all sort of feel a bit embroiled in there at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's kind of reaction, and response we've had from a lot of people across all different phases and key stages, is saying particularly how that's increased since the pandemic. And I think, potentially for us, in the, in Somerset, we had some of these pressures going into the pandemic, and when some of that has escalated, that anxiety from children, if we've already been in a bit of an anxious place because of the pressures, because of the challenges, because of some of the isolation, actually that, our resilience is already impacted. We're going into that anxious place already impacted in terms of our position as practitioners. And I think we've all felt a bit of that. Does anyone else have any comments or reflections you want to share?
Got Nikki.
Sorry, on mute. A couple of things in the chat from Cheryl's put yes, removal of supporting services, and Louise Hannon has put, is there merit in lobbying with other local authorities for awareness?
Yeah, and thank you. I think in fact I was speaking to a journalist earlier today saying I think this is something that should be part of the national debate about how how practitioners are experiencing this kind of thing, but also about the importance of support. that, you know, if we want to serve our children, we need to serve the people that children rely on. So yeah, absolutely. I think this is something that we need to be talking about in Somerset. And I think as well, let's raise the awareness of how this impacts on people that are, you know, that all our children rely on. It's really important that everyone feels strong and supported, part of a team with the infrastructure behind them, with the services behind them. And, you know, I'll just go on in a moment to talk about how we bring about the change, but that's got to be about that, hasn't it? So I just want to take you through some of the things we're talking about, or what different could look like. You know, one of the things that we will want to focus on is the pupils who need us most, and they're quite often on the forefront of our minds, but also about how we improve the offer for all pupils. I know in early years we don't call them pupils. We were having this debate the other day. Because when we put children, we then put children in young people, and then someone says, well, what about those who are 16 plus? So I'm just going to put my hand up and say we were wrestling over this about whether we could say children, young people, pupils and learners, or I've kept it at pupils just because it's very short. So if any of you have an allergy to that, I'm flagging. I know. But you know, this is about supporting the people that children rely on. You know, when children are in a setting, they need those adults to be well supported. But also, it's not just about education. I think sometimes you said, oh, you know, the setting can do it, the school can do it, the college can do it, rather than saying, actually, it takes a county to raise the next generation, and who else is helping? Who else is coming around this important task? And then also about employers, and I think that's, you know, dialogue we need to have, you know, around all the organisations who are sort of one step away from the front line, but who have that employment responsibility, because that's really critical in terms of the support that's being offered. But finally, it's about the long term. So we need to have that focus on the plan for the long term, because one of the things a lot of people have said to us is, we've been here before, you've talked a good game, you've gone away, there's been a plan, there's been this, but nothing has changed. It's not had that legacy, that long-term impact. So that's something we're very, very focused on, to say, yes, there is a new plan, but it's going to have to last. We're going to have to be building things that last, that go on and on and on, because actually that's the only way we're going to affect real change. But also, I think it's really important that we have a conversation and an awareness of who has capacity to engage. And one of the things that, you know, people have fed back is, you know, is unhelpful, is that where a setting or a school is in a position where they're in crisis, that's all that they can deal with. That's all that they can deal with, is that crisis. Even if they've just got to the point of leadership stability, that's all that they can deal with. Even if they've just got to the point where they are just focusing on the basics, they're just getting the basics in place. It's not then until you've got those basics in place, you're stable, can you lift your head up and say, and now I'm going to collaborate across the sector, or I'm going to get involved in kind of multi-agency projects. It's really important that we recognise that we're supporting those who haven't got that capacity yet. It's not saying they never will, but they haven't got it yet. But those who do have that capacity to engage should need to provide that leadership, and looking to them to provide that leadership. We are, and this is, again, it's about the long term, is about making sure there's a new governance structure. So, you know, we can all spend a lot of time in meetings if we wanted to. There's no luxury to do that when you are managing a setting. But there are some people, you know, like me and my colleagues, and that's a lot of what we do. But if we don't get those governance structures right, we don't move forward. And that's why I think it's so important, you know, how Rachel has contributed. When you get people coming together with a really clear focus, you know, that really does move things on. So we are going to create a new high-level board to bring together everyone working to support the earliest years of life. And Alison will say a bit more in a moment. We've got lots of people who are really important in terms of that support for early years. And it's really important that they are held to account and they have a really clear plan for working together. So we'll say more about that in a moment. We also want to connect that into an overarching education board. So it's really clear that early years is not left out, that it's part of that education conversation alongside schools, alongside post-16, but also connecting to the integrated care system. And the ICS, if you've not heard of that, is the new way that they are organising the health system, and the local authority is participating in that. So we're making sure that this is not just about any part of the system working on its own or being left on its own, but that everyone understands how important the earliest years of life are, and that's part of the overarching plan for the county as a whole. So these are still in development, we're still working them up, but as soon as we have the detail, we will share it with you. And then there is the kind of things we're talking about in the plan. Again, this is just in draft. I'd be interested to hear your views about the kind of things we're discussing. But one of the things that we're talking about is doing something really quickly with pupils who are at risk of care and or exclusion. And I know you will, be among all of us to say that can be one of the most stressful, anxiety-inducing situations where a child is in a really a difficult situation and just want to know that something is being done. So doing some high impact work there, but using that learning, and work is already underway on this, but making sure that that comes to fruition quickly around a refreshed early help system. And that focus very much on children remaining in school, which is a particular gap, but the early help system is about getting in early and is very much for all phases, not just for schools. There are other things that might come out of that, looking at timetabling, looking at assessment, but very much from the very earliest ages about making sure that there's a really good mental health offer for every child, whether they have a diagnosis or they have an acute need or not, and that's at any age. You'll be aware that we have 2-year-old checks, but not every child at the moment is getting their 2-year-old check. So that would be a priority, but also that 2-year-old check realizes the ambition of being both a health check and a check that connects with the early years assessment at 2. So that's something we want to do straight away. There are other things to look at around the curriculum, around vision, hearing, speech and language checks, both at Key Stage 1 as well as that connecting through to the 0 to 18 months. The RHSE curriculum should be world class, and that should be a 0 to 19 curriculum. And also, and this might take a little bit longer to get to, but understanding what sustainability looks like for rural areas from 0 to 11 in particular. And those of you who are in a rural area will know that some of the biggest challenges for a sustainability for early years are in our villages. Really important that we support the people that pupils rely on. I think there's a lot of good work has been done around recruitment campaigns. We had a big campaign around childminders, which will continue. That's already in place. We haven't really done anything around school-based recruitment, but I think the work that's already been done around childminders and already been done around children's social care, what we want to do is to bring that all together so that school-based can sit alongside, early years can sit alongside children's social care and do a push on that. We want to make sure that there's a place where people can access CPD and lots of good ideas coming in around that. We want to think about the things that practitioners should know for anyone working with children, because one of the things that we've learned so much from the early years communities is that actually the things that underpin good practice are the same whether you are early years practitioner, whether you work in a school, whether you work in children's social care or you work in health. For schools, we want to look at national curriculum subjects and also think about our leadership development and succession across employers across the piece, because we have some fantastic leadership potential, but it's not always well coordinated to enable people to realise their goals. Phonics, you will know better than anyone, is really important. There's probably more that we could do to get our libraries and our booksellers supporting the early years focus and the school focus on phonics. Some of the things that we could do more broadly is around housing standards, finding out what independent schools could do to contribute. really doing a big push on music, and then looking at routes in the bus strategy. And as we said, the employers need to be empowered to lead this. So that's again about governance. We're looking at some projects focusing on the basics of education. There'll be more information about that to follow. Looking at how we plan in areas, and also thinking about some of these more longer term things about how we learn from that. And then things about the infrastructure, make sure that there's a really clear baseline. And as I said, we are getting professional evaluators to help us do that rigorously. As well as discussing what that looks like. So I very much hope that we'll have some of you contributing to how we look at monitoring and analysis, and helping us get that right for early years. We get our politicians to help us track progress and hold us to account. And then very important, I think, that we get to a place where we are doing more to publicise the strengths and achievements of our schools, settings and colleges. So in terms of next steps, we are coming to speak to lots of different stakeholders, as well as today, there are lots of other conversations going on. We are approaching system leaders about leading themes on education leadership basics. So that's a conversation we're having with some of the CEOs in the county, and we'll tell you more about that to follow. As I said, this is all changing as we go, so we're evolving it as we speak to people, and your feedback's very valuable. There will be an event on the 21st of March to launch a strategy, and we'll be coming out to early years representatives very soon to join that event. So I'm going to stop there, and as well, there's any questions or comments on that so far.
We've had a couple of things that come through in the chat, Amelia. A couple of people have said it's really difficult to get mental health support for children, especially if they need to go through CAMHS. That's almost an impossible task. People commenting that it's a national picture, so only part of that is in our control. And then some talk about health visitors and the fact that there is a feeling that there's the visibility of health visitors isn't great. And that is impacting, especially on childminders, in terms of that collaboration and joint working.
Yeah, and I think the comments around health visiting is really, that's exactly the kind of conversation we need to have, is to say that actually when we all pull together, it makes our jobs easier, it makes outcomes for children better, and not being able to get that joined up support with colleagues, whether they are in health or whether they're in school or it's CAMHS, that really does have an impact. So that is very much where we need to be, is getting everyone pulling together. And that's one of the things that we can do in the local authority, is to use our relationships and our levers to have those conversations at the very highest level, all the way up to, the chief executive of the ICS, who's responsible for the whole of health in Somerset. So yeah, I would echo that those are all conversations that we will have. And I think the important thing that you should all hear is that education is now more important in the local authority than it has been for a long, long time. And Alison, and colleagues, are experiencing this, all the time. The attention that is being given, the priority that's being given to education, right to the very top of the organisation. I don't know if you know that Bill Revens, who's now leader of the council, was himself a teacher in his career. And he always says education is the silver bullet. He sees an education strategy as part, as an important driver for the whole strategy for the county. Now, that doesn't solve all our problems overnight, but it does make a big difference when education matters. And the people who are most powerful and influential in the county are saying we all need to step up and support education more. And I would say Bill is very much, making sure that he's holding us to account for the priority on early years, which is very important to him. So if any of you are feeling like there was a time when, early years just didn't matter enough to the powers that be, I would say that time has come to an end. You are very, very important.
We've just had another one come in. It's from Vicky. We're on the border of Devon and Somerset, so quite often get passed from pillar to post from which county. Should deal with what we need. Parents live in Devon but come to us in Somerset, but Devon health visitors will tell parents that it's something we need to deal with, but then Somerset won't see the child as they live in Devon.
Yeah, really good point, Vicky. And, you know, I think that's all the kind of things that need a strategic conversation, don't they? They need people at the top being made aware of how that impacts on children. And then by working together, we can deal with those things. But yes, I agree. And that's, you know, that's exactly the kind of thing we need to be dealing with. Emma says, good to hear early years a priority, but it requires funding. And you will know as well as I do that we are at, you know, our kind of, everyone is struggling with money at the moment. I know that's on so many people's minds. It's been difficult for a long time. And it's only got harder. Obviously, we'll touch on the finances shortly. But, you know, well, I can't give you great news that loads of money is coming into education straight away because nobody has any money. It will get easier. And I think, you know, one thing that you can always count on is that if you don't matter, then the funding doesn't follow. I can guarantee you that as money becomes available, because we're in the tightest spot that we probably ever will be this year, that education will be at the front of the queue.
Can I make a comment? Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
So I totally get where you're coming from. Your hands are tied, as is everyone else's in the council. But it is woefully inadequate. And the problem is that the children that are currently suffering and will continue to suffer the most from this are those in deprived areas. Just so you're aware, I've just been voted onto the board of directors, trustee board and board of directors on the Early Years Alliance. So that's going to be one of the key things that I want to work with Neil Leach with over the next 2 or 3 years, is just wherever we can trying to raise the issues with government, because it is just horrendous. And unfortunately, a lot of nurseries, if they haven't already gone under, particularly ones in more deprived areas, will go. And those children that really need it will not get what they need. Practitioners are leaving in their droves as well, which I'm sure you're well aware of. But yes, I understand. Hands are tied. Thank you.
But you know, I think we all share your view, Emma, that it's an unsustainable situation. And you know, I think that you're absolutely right, and I think it's congratulations. It's fantastic to know that you will be in such a prestigious and influential role. If there's anything we can do to back you and to support you in that, you know, you only have to ask.
And vice versa. That's what I'm thinking. If there's anything I can do,
because I think, you know, one of the things that we have to do when times are tight is that we have to be even more joined up, even more collaborative and innovative to make what we have go farther. So, you know, I think this is when times are tight, you know, we have to really put heads together and say, how do we make things work better, and really push ourselves to say, is there a different way? We can't magic up more money, but we can be, you know, Somerset is a very creative place. And, you know, I've always been very impressed by the caliber of people we have here. We don't benefit from that unless we're all putting our heads together to find our way out of a tight spot. So, yeah, fantastic to hear that you are, you know, you'll be taking this to the highest levels. But, you know, this is where we need to
my
be working
voice.
together.
I already have. I was at an all parliamentary group with, I think is it Steve Brine? He's on the healthcare committee, and I brought up the issues and the funding, and I will be continuing to. And goodness knows if I'll get anywhere, but we can but try. So yeah, do get in touch if I can be of any help in anything as well.
It's fantastic. Thank you, Emma.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
We've got a hand up from Liz.
Yeah, hi there. Sorry, my camera's not working, so you can't see me. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah,
It's just off the back of what Emma was saying. I've just completed a budget forecast this morning, and obviously with the national living wage increasing from April, I've calculated that if we were to apply that increase across the board, so it keeps the differentiation between the different levels of staff, it would cost us almost £11,000 additional on payroll costs each year. And that's without the on costs, that's just literally the 92p extra. So clearly we can't do that, but potentially we're going to be in a position where a practitioner is earning almost as much as a supervisor is. So it's a real difficult one. Obviously, I'm sure everyone's eagerly awaiting the new funding rates, but I can't imagine in my wildest dreams that they're going to cover that at all. So I guess it's nice to have a real life example of how it's going to impact upon a setting. And we're not a big setting at all. We're a small setting.
Yeah, and you know, I think not a day goes by where I'm not in a conversation with absolutely huge holes in budgets. We've had £1.2 million taken from our budget by the government this as of April. I think social care's inflationary and demand increase is something like £20 million. So that some of the numbers we're all looking at are just enormous. Inflation in my budget in last year alone was £700,000 that we hadn't budgeted for. So, you know, but you know, the thing we all need to be mindful of is that, you know, every early years, you know, setting, you know, the margins are so very, very tight already. You know, where does that come from? So, yeah, I think I hear you. I hear you absolutely. Rachel?
Hi, yeah, I totally agree with the last lady. We've been doing some costings as well, and there is even discussion, because we're a charity committee run setting, that we no longer take funded children. We take only fee paying children because they bring in more revenue. Because we are in dire straits like many of the other settings, which is what I've discussed at these meetings. And unless somebody listens to us, then I can see more and more people struggling to keep their setting open. I've got colleagues that have been in the sector for longer than I have, who have just gone because they've just had enough of the battles. So it is very difficult. I don't know how we're going to make our money meet. I work 15 hours a week unpaid just to keep everything going here. But not everyone's as daft as I am. But it's important to me to make sure things are going on. But it's not fair when, like you say, supervisors are very similar or only slightly above those other staff that are level 3, level 4 practitioners. You know, the gap is closing too much. And I think as a sector, when I've got part-time staff that can earn more at the local spa shop than they can here, well, they're going to go to the local spa shop. So it's going to be crippling for all of us with this minimum wage going up. And I am less than I was in. The money I get for the entitlement is less than I was on in 2011. So it's really sad.
So just on a really practical point, when someone was saying about you know, about raising this, because you know, none of us have the answer, but we do need to be we need to know that people know what the situation is. So I think if anyone wants to write to me and just outline what you've outlined there, I'm really happy to put that all together and to share that with Tessa, our executive member, and just see if there's anything that she can do to flag that nationally. But also, I think it's just really important that our politicians, you know what you've just shared. And I think if you're able to just provide some of those numbers, you know, I think we need to make sure that people understand that in the way that you've just described it.
I also think, Amelia, just before we go on, we've got the paramedics on strike, the nurses on strike, the teachers going on strike. 2 members of my team made a very valid suggestion. If we refuse to take funded children, so if they were funded, we'd take them if they paid our wage. We wouldn't claim our funding, but we would gain more. But it might make some people sit up and take notice. which I thought was a really valid point. So people could still access. We're not shutting, but they will have to pay for our service. So I think that is a valid point across the whole of the country, let alone just Somerset. But Somerset are in the bottom few and get the minimum amount of money.
So we recently answered on behalf of the local authority a survey from the Quorum Trust about this very issue. So we have highlighted to them, and we constantly highlight it to the DFE when we meet with our representatives in the Southwest. Whatever opportunities we have, you know, the first thing I say is I'm not going to ignore the big issue. Funding is inadequate and our providers are closing as a result of it, so we are absolutely feeding that back. I think earlier in the chat Louise Hannon was suggesting that perhaps we all get together and write a letter, lobby our MP. You know, we have to raise the profile of this and start banging some drums very loudly. I think they are sitting up and taking notice, but if you know, every little helps, I think, in terms of coming together and telling them how tough it is.
Tessa's here. Hello, Tessa. We're going to provide you with a briefing, but you don't have to because you're in the room. This is the glories of online communication.
Indeed. It certainly is. I think you could, if somebody would like to draft me, I will tesserize your drafts. And just, yes, tell me what I have to do and I will do it. You know, more, well, broadly within reason, but I'm up for anything. Okay. Thank you.
Fabulous. And while you're here, you can perhaps attest to my statement that education is very high priority for this administration, because you're here to say so yourself.
Yes, exactly. Well, firstly, I think it, but secondly, it's not just Bill Revens who was a teacher. I was one in a previous life, and I've worked with adults with learning disabilities who were children with learning disabilities before I got them, and I've been a school governor for a couple of centuries, you know, so there's all sorts of stuff, and I'm a governor of a special school, albeit I'm a sleeping one at the moment, because frankly that can't be fitted in with this job, but I am absolutely on one. When it comes to this stuff, absolutely on one. And I was actually going to ask our group of the 61 who make up, you know, the group that is running the council. I think we'd have a very high, we'd have a high percentage of that group who would have had quite a lot of involvement in schools in all sorts of ways, and I think you'll find their commitment is the same. And I think I described to possibly to Amelia, but certainly to Claire Winter, we have a Slack group that we use to communicate amongst ourselves, and it is optional whether you join the children and families bit, same as it is adult social care. You know, you join the bits you're interested in, and out of the 61, 57 of them are members of the children and families group, which to me suggests that you are very high priority, because I can look at the others and smirk and and know that they have numbers, but they don't have 57 out of 61. And I am actually just trying to work out, when I've got time, I'll work out who the 4 who aren't joined up are. In a nice way, of course.
Everyone must support our children.
Absolutely committed. Yeah, absolutely committed. And I think it would be very interesting. I think you'll find there's a huge amount of support amongst my colleagues for the work that you're doing and the work that you're trying to do, in spite of the various things that are put in your way. But my opportunity to say thank you. So onward and upward.
Fantastic. So Emma said that she's tried to make the case at the APPG, and Louise has flagged that as well. So yes, I think fantastic. You've heard it from Tessa's own lips. If you have just the case study of what you're dealing with and the pressures that you're under, that you want to email me, I've put them in my email address in the chat, and I will put something together and for a letter for Tessa. Sarah, you've got your hand up.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to slip in there that actually it's not just about the local authority challenging and going back all the time about the level of funding. As officers, they listen to us, they listen more to providers directly. So absolutely, yes, channel your experiences into the local authority, and we absolutely will champion that. And I meet with the DFE on a monthly basis, and it's always the last thing on the agenda, which I ask. Funding is always the last thing on the agenda, which I ask to be brought to the first agenda item, which irritates our DFE lead very much so. But actually, you know, to lobby directly as providers, you have more impression than local authority officers do. So yes, we will absolutely support you, but also lobby yourselves directly.
Thank you, Sarah. That's so helpful. I'm mindful of time, really important conversation, but we will continue to have this conversation. I'm going to pass back over to Alison for the next item.
Brilliant. We will get on with the next agenda item is about support for the earlier sector via the new redesign, and then we will get to the hourly rates. So I'll make sure that I prioritise that for everybody, because I know you're keen to see that. So obviously you've heard, and we've been reporting back and giving you updates, and certainly you were involved in the consultation back in 2022 about the redesign of education partnerships and skills and inclusion. That process has now concluded and those teams are in place. A couple of vacancies here and there, but most of it is pretty much where it needs to be. I just wanted to put a few slides together just to illustrate to you and reassure you of where your support is, and the fact that actually it is increased, or it has increased rather, and that was the promise through the redesign process and the consultation. So, you know, I absolutely appreciate there's been a period of a month or more where there's been some settlement, some transition periods to get to the new ways of working, but I am absolutely confident that you will start to see this support from this moment. So this graphic really just illustrates that before, yes, we had an early years team. Yes, we had amazing feedback from our sector. We had processes and things set up to support you, but as a small team, we were responsible for almost every aspect of early years support in Somerset, including all of the statutory duties that are incumbent on a local authority to ensure they commit to, and also a lot of the other issues. Sufficiency, sustainability, we've talked at length about that. We've just had that conversation. We also were responsible as a team for entitlements, the quality of education in early years, making sure there was advice, support and guidance, all of the training, obviously supporting the early years communities, the communications, the newsletters. I could go on, but everything was within us as a smaller team. It is absolutely the vision of all of us, and Amelia, put forward alongside Rob Hart with the okay of every kind of leader within the local authority, that we needed to change things, and she's already kind of described the picture on the ground in terms of why that was needed. And bringing our services together to ensure that there was a better support offer for schools and settings, 0 to 19, 0 to 25, obviously in terms of SEND and inclusion. So rather than an early years team sitting on its own, doing its best and having so much of support from you out there in the sector, what we now have is a joined up collaborative approach across various teams and organisations that spread far and wide, not just within the local authority, but externally as well. And that includes, for this purpose, the inclusion team, the education partnerships and skills, and then the early help elements, which incorporates what I've put there in terms of the early help support package for you, family support, advice, support and training, and obviously from a public health visitor, those kind of aspects as well.
Alison,
yes, Sarah.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, but if you've got presentation, you're not actually sharing it.
Oh gosh, well done.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. So yeah, as you can see, the early years team sat here with all of these responsibilities, and now we're part of this bigger system to enact change over 0 to 19 and 0 to 25 inclusion. So in terms of the inclusion support, that is your high needs funding, your early years SEND service, which includes your early years area SENCOs and Portage. And I know Rebecca's here tonight with us. She has some slides that she'll be sharing in a moment just to illustrate that even further. And then as part of education partnerships and skills, all of those statutory duties, all of those list of support services and more are now included within a wider remit. And in a moment, I've got a structured chart to again further illustrate that. And then, as I said, the early help aspect, including the other aspects of your work, the important aspects of the 2-year-old check, health visitor relationships, early help, and so on and so forth. So I've mapped out for you and just highlighted, there's obviously lots more people in education partnerships and skills, I must stress that, but I wanted to pick out for you those roles that were really pertinent and visible in terms of early years. So you'll see here, obviously, Amelia sitting Assistant Director of Education Partnerships and Skills. And then there are 4 strategic managers sat within that team, including myself, Heather Good, who's joining us at the end of this month as Head of Education Leadership. At the moment, we have Judith Barrett, who's acting up as Head of Education Leadership currently. And then we have Phil Curd, Head of Education Places, and Head of Education Operation, Joe O'Callaghan. Some of those names you might recognise. If I just focus firstly on the leadership aspects, that this is where a lot of support will come to you as early years providers. There is a service manager there, Sam Simmons, who takes on the role of Service Manager Education Leadership Advisory. That includes all parts of early years governance, committee support, etc., and safeguarding as well. And then there will be a new service manager for education relationships, as well as taking an early years lead role for some aspects, not what was formerly my role, but supporting the relationship, supporting the communications, supporting that first point of contact for you as early years providers when you need something from us as a local authority. And then here it's really great to be able to share with you tonight who your relationship managers are. These again are your first point of contact. These people are responsible for early years settings, schools and secondary schools. They have a big remit, but they're not expected to give you all the answers straight away. They will if you can, but they will be acting as a bit of a triage, making sure that you are signposted to the correct team to be able to support the individual question or piece of advice and support and information that you need. So for Taunton and West Somerset, that's Liz Smith. You might recognise her before. She was part of the Education Places team before. We have Kate Edwards in Mendip. We have Marie Palmer in South Somerset and Jane Weatherall for Sedgemoor. And I think some of those people are here now. So if you wouldn't mind just putting your video on and just showing people your faces and giving them a wave, that would be really appreciated. It's Kate. Hi, Kate.
Hi. Nice to meet you all. And obviously in due course, I will be coming round to see you all. So yes, if anyone's from Mendip area, I will be round shortly.
Fabulous. Thanks, Kate. Any other relationship managers? I'm not sure there's any more with us, but they will be joining meetings like this going forward. So, but they also, as Kate just said, they'll be introducing themselves shortly to you. So in terms of curriculum and literacy, which is my remit, that absolutely has an early years focus. That's a 0 to 19 role. Within my team, we have a service manager for curriculum, projects and resources, which is a brand new team, really exciting opportunities for us as a county moving forward in terms of that curriculum design element, networking, and some really exciting projects on the horizon. That's being headed up by Kate Daunton. And within that team, you will recognise and obviously know these people very well. Nikki's already brought herself onto the screen this evening. So Nikki takes on the role of curriculum and topic lead and has an early years specialism within that. And Jo Sawyer, obviously you know her, will take on the role or has taken on the role of curriculum networks officer with a specific remit around childminder support. So that is where that aspect of our support now sits within the new redesign and restructure. The head of education places, Phil Kurd, he manages the brand new service manager for education places strategy. Hot off the press, for those of you who probably don't know this, is our very own Sarah Love. And in a minute, she's got a slide and she'll be sharing some of the her responsibilities, and they'll be very familiar to you. All of the sufficiency and sustainability aspects of early years that are obviously, you know, very, very important to people at the moment, causing a lot of anxiety, will be within her remit. But equally, all of us across Education Partnerships and Skills will be working together to support that as well. And then we have Joe O'Callaghan, Head of Education Operations. That has traditionally been the more traded element of school support, things that schools have, such as grounds maintenance, etc. So at the moment, there isn't necessarily any focus particularly on early years, because that traded offer has never really been there for early years in the same way as schools. But it doesn't mean to say that that isn't something that we might consider talking about, consulting about in the future, and seeing whether it's worth exploring that anymore. Okay, moving on. In terms of inclusion, obviously I've already talked about Rebecca being here. She's got some slides, but our new head of SEND in that strategic position is Claire Merchant-Jones. Here's Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca. And Rebecca, as you know, as she's introduced herself on a few occasions now, is the service manager for Early Years SEND service, which incorporates the Portage, Early Years Area SENCOs and Inclusion Advisor roles. So Rebecca, I don't know whether you wanted to just mention anything about that.
That's fine. I'll mention it when I do my slides. If that's easier for you, that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Thanks. And just to introduce the other strategic managers in the inclusion team, we have the strategic manager, inclusion transformations and partnerships, who is Amy Joins, who was formerly head of education improvements. We have head of vulnerable learners. Many of you will be familiar with Julia Ridge. And lastly, but not least, principal education psychologist, Tim Cockrell. Okay, so I'll hand over to Sarah just quickly so she can introduce herself in her brand new role as Service Manager for Education Places Strategy.
Well, hi everyone. I haven't gone too far. I'm still here. Sorry. Yes, I pick up my new post on Monday as Service Manager in Education Places, and it's a rather large remit, but I've actually contained it to what support is there for you as early years. So absolutely, it's to support the delivery of sufficient early years and school places. So that's around ensuring that we've got sufficiency of places in all of our areas across Somerset. Monitor and understand parental demand and understand the local demand within your areas. And as you know, early years is a little bit different from schools. We don't have catchment areas. We've got parental choice, and parents move their children depending on where they're working, what they're doing. We've also, you know, we're in a curveball at the minute because that's slightly changed with the pandemic. People's working patterns have changed. And it's been in the news, in the media quite a lot recently about what parents require and want. So we're monitoring that demand, and we're providing that information in our sufficiency assessments across the board. So again, we're looking at identifying areas where we have insufficient childcare and thinking outside the box of how we can make sure that we meet those demands that parents are needing. Our team will also be looking at understanding your business. We will be looking at providing advice and support to make sure that you have a financially viable business. And listening to Rachel, Emma and Liz earlier, that's going to be very much a challenge with all of the increases that we do know about, and trust me, I'm fully aware of and understand the challenges that you face as leaders and managers in regards to recruitment and finding, you know, quality staff on essentially what is minimum wage, and no differentiation between that practitioner and manager. It's so difficult. So yeah, absolutely happy to listen, work with you, and try to come up with some strategies to support that. And then obviously we'd also do lead on providing support around change of ownerships, whether it's a, you know, school a preschool going into a school, whether it's a new provision, whether it's a sale of a private provider, etc. We will support that and provide advice and support. We'll have an overview of the early years entitlement. So we will oversee what that entitlement is. We will look at the single funding formula into the future. Alison's going to deliver the funding rates obviously tonight, but into the future we will be working with our funding team and with our finance team to understand what the funding rates are going to be. And as I mentioned earlier, always at the forefront of my conversations with anybody is the challenge that the funding rate doesn't cover the costs. And the challenge that has for our providers in being able to meet their expenditures. Obviously, we work with DFE with our provider agreement to make sure that we are meeting the criteria that is implemented by them, and obviously to champion the universal extended and obviously 2-year-old funding. And I don't know if people are aware, but we've had a bit of a drop in the take up of our 2-year-old funding in the last year, so absolutely focusing a little bit on raising that out to the public about that 2-year-old funding. So yeah, the provider agreement I've already mentioned, so we'll make sure that we keep that updated, that we'll be responsible, our team will be responsible for ensuring that, you know, providers sign up to the agreement. And you know, I'll just say I will be interested to have a conversation with you, Rachel, in regards to what you mentioned earlier about actually not taking the funding. So it would be good to book in a meeting and have a conversation. But it's making sure also that we're meeting the criteria around that, and obviously leading on early years audits, etc. And then obviously sustainability. We need to ensure that we provide support to you as providers around maintaining a viable business. And absolutely, I'm not going to say that's easy. You guys have known me for a long time. I've been around for a long time. You know that, you know, it is the most challenging aspect of our delivery at the moment. It is around ensuring that you've got a viable business that supports raising outcomes for those children, so that are in your care. So we will, you know, be providing support and advice around business. I can't say that I'm going to pull anything new out the bag, but it's about those open and honest communications, discussions and talks, and thinking outside the bag as to how we can support you in maintaining your maintaining a viable business. And obviously we still have at this moment in time a sustainability grant, and obviously we will manage that sustainability grant, which, you know, is not going to be, you know, is not going to be the silver wand that, or the gold wand that's going to fix every problem, but absolutely in areas where we absolutely need sufficiency of places, especially for our most disadvantaged families, you know, that there's an opportunity to be able to access some grant funding. So that's it for me in a nutshell, because I appreciate that we've got a short period of time. My contact details haven't changed. I think I joined the authority in, I don't know, 2001, I think, or well, 1999 officially, but 2001 I came into the early years team officially. My contact details have not changed other than my email that's changed because of the unitary council coming in, but my telephone numbers are exactly the same as they were in 2001. But I will be more than welcome to say, you know, anybody got any issues, worries, concerns, then you've got my details. Feel free to give me a call, drop me an email.
Brilliant, thank you, Sarah. So just some key messages to round up this agenda item. I hope that those graphics I've described, and certainly Sarah's concluded as well, that there is more support. There is certainly more people focused on early years, more people that you already know and trust in positions of responsibility. There's definitely more leverage, as Councillor Tessa Munt and Amelia has been describing, you know, there is a real push for education now to support education as a whole. So definitely more leverage added to the redesign, which makes it stronger. Increased governance and oversight by leaders. So that's that high level board that Amelia was describing earlier, and for the earliest years of life. So that is a collaborative board, member led, where we can come together to get things really going in terms of support for the sector, for children, for families. Clear points of contact through your relationship managers, as we've described already, and front and centre of the education strategy, which Amelia has also clearly described as well. Amelia, was there anything you wanted to add before I move on to funding rates?
No, I just wanted to, I think there's another key person who's not yet in post, just to flag that we're currently recruiting for an early years safeguarding lead. And I believe that has been appointed, but not yet in post. So that'd be another person, and we'll share their details as soon as they are with us.
Fabulous, thank you. Okay, so now the bit that I know you're really eager. I've kept it short and snappy, so I've highlighted the main headlines. So from April, so for the financial year 23-24, the hourly rates for providers. So the 2-year-old funding rate increases by 6 pence. All of the funding that came in from DFE, we've popped on the 2-year-old hourly rates because we recognise that 6 pence is not a massive increase, so we've actually put it all onto the 2-year-old base rates. From a 3- and 4-year-old base rate, again, we've been able to put most of the money in, so that's an increase of 16 pence per hour. So formerly the base rate was £4.41, and that's going up to £4.57. There's also an increase in early years pupil premium, which is increasing to £353 per annum, and that's an increase from £342 on the last financial year. And the Disability Access Fund as well has increased to £828. That's an increase from £800. So I absolutely recognise that the conversations we've already had tonight about uplifting the national minimum wage and national living wage, etc., is putting massive pressure on, as well as the cost of living, the cost of fuel, etc. We have been able to keep the funding rates still going through to the hourly rates, and we withhold the minimum of 3%. That we've kept that the same. We know other local authorities hold back a lot more than that. We recognise the pressures, so we give the majority of it out to our providers. Yes, Lauren, the deprivation rate you'll be given in your individual breakdown of what you're going to be getting. So that the least amount you'll be getting is that £4.57, and then any deprivation rate will be added on top of that for you. That'll be calculated at the time when all of your individual forms come out with those amounts on. Okay, Alison, Marco, just to make you aware that you're on video, just in case you haven't realised. Any questions about the hourly rate for providers from anybody? Okay, we have some hands up. Bear with me while I find you. Rachel.
Hi, yeah. So previously we used to have discussions on how we reached this amount, and there was debates and discussions. And obviously there's a 3% that's taken off the top, which we all know about, and there's other money that's used. But some of our concerns are the amount of money that's out in this sector that isn't being used, that could actually be another penny or a 2p on the base rate at this point, albeit maybe for a year or 2 years, or a lump sum, which will come up in the next meeting, I'm sure, because there's another meeting following this one. But there's still, I've asked, along with other practitioners and managers, for a little bit more clarity around how money is spent. So I'm part of a lot of it, but I'm still have been asked for the clarity around the money that is spent. So the small pots of money, the communities, the SAYS, speech and language, etc., and a little bit more clarity. Obviously, we don't can't know details of impact and data, but it would be good to have an overarching understanding of how that is impacting on the settings, how is it impacting on the county and those individual children, obviously without names and things like that, but where things are put into place, like a SAYS, like the community, CPD, you know, what impact is that having when it's a lot of our money that's being spent? And like I said, we used to have a lot of debates and decisions, which is why I am now on less money than I was years ago, which was under the instruction of county to do my degree to get more money, and then that money goes again. And I realise changes happen, but you know, like I spoke out with Amelia, you know, we've been on journeys before and we've got to action plans, as you know, Alison. I've sat on many meetings with you, but I just want to know how we're going to get to the end of any of these things and where the clarity is for the sector, because we are really struggling out here with money. I'm nearly there now with, you know, it's really hard to make any money meet the needs of what we need it for, which is our children, which is first and foremost.
Amelia, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, and I know, you know, you've always provided really helpful challenge, Rachel. I'll say, you know, what I've said, I'll say to everyone, what I think I've said to you is, if there's any money in the system that I don't know about, please tell me. I'd really like to know where it is, because one of the things we've been doing is going, you know, and I think it's important that we be transparent. You know, when I came into the job, we didn't know where the money was. I wouldn't say for the early years team probably had a better grip than anyone, actually. And I think Alison, you know, but across the piece, you know, and I think a huge shout out to our finance colleagues who have worked incredibly hard since I've joined to help us find out where the money is. I think we are now really clear where the money is. The challenge we've had is that through that period, the money has just got tighter and tighter and tighter. And you'll know we're having some really tough conversations right now with our LA maintained schools, where they have been faced with enormous bills because we've lost so much money in government subsidy. So if anyone knows of any pots of money that we can do more with, please tell me straight away, because I am very keen that we maximize every single penny for the behalf of our settings, our schools and our children. But it is really super tight everywhere. So it's really important. And I think what the challenge you're giving us, Rachel, we all need to be on it to make sure that every penny counts, that everything we're spending on the sector is having an impact. And if there is any, and sometimes we do, we found a bit of an option, you know, to find some extra money to mitigate the costs for schools because of the interest on their reserves. So that was something we found, which was good. It's not going to solve all our problems, but it, you know, it helped to mitigate. If any of you have any clever ideas about how we can do things differently, we are open to any suggestion at all, because you are under pressure, we are under pressure, everyone is under pressure. So we just need to be really clever and efficient.
Absolutely. If I can just come in there as well. I mean, you know, Rachel, we've had a you know, many conversations about this. I just wanted to say that nothing really has changed in terms of the way that we're issuing money out. So all of the things that we were paying for out of that 3% are largely the same. The only slight tweak that we've made is for the early help from the Early Years Alliance, so the early years early help support for our providers. So we're actually putting slightly more into that, but we've been offsetting that by reducing some of the translation interpretation services, because we recognise that early help actually is something that many of our providers are needing support with. So obviously with a finite amount of budget, we have to make sure that money goes as far as we can possibly make it go. So that's why those decisions were made. And obviously we talked about that in previous partnerships last year and in previous forums. So absolutely, I mean, nothing really has changed. If you I can give another breakdown. It will be very similar to the one I gave last time in terms of what monies we give to the early years SENCO team for education, early years safeguarding, for the entitlements checker. You know, every single penny has been accounted for. We do hold back a contingency. I've described that in previous partnership meetings, but absolutely, if there's anything left in that contingency budget, it gets paid back to you. So for the last 2 years, you will have had an amount come back into your accounts. That is that contingency payment, which is based on pro rata the hours that you have applied, claimed rather, in that funded year. So yeah, I mean, really nothing's changed. I'm very, very happy to give another update about what that's spent on. And just to illustrate the penny on the base rates, it currently stands at around £60,000 is about 1 penny on the base rates. So I think you mentioned the SAYS and the earliest communities. That pot of money is only £60,000. So yes, it equates to a penny on your base rates.
No, it's not though, Alison, is it?
Why is it not?
Well, we've got 20k. We've got 20k in our pot.
Oh, that's been obviously accrued over many, many years, but annually.
Yeah, we're not the only one. There's 11 pots of money. We need to have some reckoning on exactly what that is, which I'm guessing will come up at the next meeting.
Yeah, so that's really helpful, Rachel. And I think I'm always keen to have a conversation about reserves, because if we
it's about the clarity that goes from here to Schools Forum, because when we talked at Schools Forum to some other colleagues, which I have done, and I've been speaking to some of the colleagues on the partnership that I'm working with you, Amelia, like Loic and that, they have no comprehension of how we work, or the money, or where it gets spent. And when we're discussing the designated school grant at Schools Forum, I think maybe there needs to be a bit more clarity there.
Yeah, so I think it's on the agenda, isn't it, for Schools Forum? And that will be the opportunity to go through that detail, because you're absolutely right. That's why it's been put on the agenda. But I think, you know, this is exactly what I'm saying to all of you, and I think you're in a privileged position, Rachel, because of your insight into the finances. You know, I will now take away an action to go and look at the reserves in communities. If there is money that hasn't been spent across the communities, I think let's absolutely know how much that is, because that's all our money. So yeah, absolutely, let's do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we brought in an application process. So where early years communities are applying for the money year on year, they're telling us what they're spending on. If they're not spending that, then actually there's a conversation about, you know, those with those reserves coming back. So absolutely, that's a good point. But the earliest communities are there to put on events and spend that money. So if it's sitting there, then perhaps there's an opportunity for you to do something more for your area with, you know, your providers there, and put that CPD out that I know is such high cost when you're buying that individually as a setting.
I think there's, sorry, Alison, it's Sarah here. I think there is some discussion around that. I think what we would need to be mindful is that the earliest communities money is not from the funding money. That is from DSG.
Yeah, it's not LA funded. Yeah, it's from DSG. It's from the 3%. Yeah,
it's not part of the 3%, and
it is part of the 3%. It comes from DSG.
But it is also about the fact that, you know, the schools are embarking in this moment in time going through a core offer. They have de-delegation funds from last year, but obviously that is changing this year, and it's about buying in those services. And it's noted that the delivery for early years, when we went through the change, if we think the changes that go back 10 years ago, where, you know, you had a 60 strong early years team that was providing huge amounts of support and training, completely fully funded, that budget has diminished year on year. And it was about the most effective way of contributing some funds to support each community in being able to access CPD at a reasonable price, if not fully funded. We have some communities that have absolutely moved forward with it and are absolutely on it and have spent their funding in the appropriate way and have had excellent reviews and responses for that. I'm not going to deny that there are some communities that haven't moved that forward in that way. I totally agree with Amelia. We need to look at that, we need to find that, but what we do need to remember is it's certainly not £60,000 that goes into the early years communities fund at all, nowhere near that. But what we don't want to be in is in a situation where we give to you or able to give to you 1 year and then have to remove that the following year. And that was the discussions that we've had around the funding, is that, yeah, you know, let's up the base rate by a penny, 2 pennies, 3 pennies. However, we can't guarantee that the following year, because that money might not be there the following year, in which case we would then be coming back to you and saying your base rate is going to be reduced. And that's what we don't want to do. We've got to make sure that we safeguard the base rate and not have it drop from year to year. And I think that's really important. And it's extremely difficult. It's, you know, it is an absolute nightmare to manage that and to get that right. But I absolutely agree with Amelia, it does need to be looked at. But what we don't want to do is give false hope by increasing the base rate 1 year and having to decrease it the following year, because that would not do any good for anybody.
We're really struggling with.
1 minute.
Okay.
1 minute. I totally get all of that. And I'm really glad that we're going to have a conversation. I've only brought it up here because every other meeting I've been brought it up to have said, take it to the partnership meeting, and then I bring it here. So that's the only reason I brought it up today, but we can move on with another time.
That's absolutely fine. And obviously we always give people the opportunity to put agenda items in. So is there anything specific you want in any partnership meeting? We always give that opportunity. So I'm happy to share previous partnership slides, or even just add in an updated one for this slide set to send out to people. As I said, not masses has changed. This has all been ratified in the past, and yeah, I can absolutely add that in. So yeah, we are being open and transparent. That this money is going to the places it always ever has done. So happy to share that along with that slide set. I must apologise, everybody. We've only got 5 minutes left. I'm really conscious there's been some really, really meaty agenda items tonight, and I'm really pleased that so many people have wanted to kind of raise their hands and get involved. So I feel that it's been time really, really well spent, but it has left us a bit short in terms of partner updates. Obviously, we're due to finish in only a few minutes. So partners, Early Years Alliance, Rebecca, obviously, Stuart from SASP, and I know Jenny's here from Take Art. It doesn't leave us a long time to do any partner updates, and I would like the opportunity just for people to ask any remaining questions that they've got outstanding. So is it okay if I share these slides and get people to come back to you, and I will absolutely rank up the time we have for our next partnership meeting? I must apologise again. But as I said, the conversation has been really rich, and I think has been really, really helpful tonight.
Alison, is it okay if I just give one quick message?
Of course.
Please, thank you. So from the Early Years Send, so I won't share the slides, but well, 2 quick messages. One, to say a big thank you to everybody who has been getting involved, and to all our staff supporting children with special needs. We have an earlier speech language communication peer review taking place now, and if you've had an invite or are interested in talking to the peers to support our improvement work in the wider system across that, please let me know, and if you've had an invite, please respond, because we're trying to get those meetings together. Thank you for supporting the graduated response. The other thing that is really key to note is we are down on capacity with area Senkos by a half at the moment due to some sickness absence and other absence, and we are doing our best to cover, but I want to manage your expectations that this is a challenge at the moment, and I know our inclusion advisors are working really hard, as are lots of other people in the team, to try and cover, but we are doing our best, and we will signpost in the slides to your other places where you can get support and some other areas where you might be able to get yourself funding in a different way. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, please do check out the slides when they come out. Sharon obviously is here from Early Years Alliance. I know Jenny wanted to share some things about the CPD courses and subsidised CPD courses as well. So there's links, etc., and information, further information on those slide decks. So please do have a look at those when they come out following this meeting. So we're just a couple of minutes away from the end of the meeting. I can see that there is a hand up. So let's go to Courtfields.
Hi there, Cheryl here. I just want to ask a question. We have been getting a difficulty with children with SEND, where we've got children coming to us who are needing one-to-one support, but there's no additional funding for us to support those children. So you're basically taking one member of staff completely out of ratio, trying to support that child. You're having to do so much work, but there's no money in the pot. And then obviously the time scales of actually getting to any professional is ridiculous. And what we're having to do is we're getting to the point where the children with SEND are, you know, we're not able to support them, which is a massive concern, because these children obviously are priorities as well to get them into setting. So just wondered what's going on with like the emergency funding situation, because it used to be there.
Yes, I can come back on that. We don't have emergency funding in that sense. If you recall, we did send out the newsletter, our change to the early years funding system. You have 6 opportunities a year rather than 3 to apply for funding. The idea is that it reduces the amount of interim funded needed because of good planning and transition with those children coming in. We are not getting very many early years high needs funding applications for the lower level of needs, actually, for the lower bands of funding. And this is something we want to explore going forward and thinking about why that is, because that SENIF money for emerging needs is there, and it's given by the government, and that's the band 1 funding. We don't get very many children at band 1. But I am in conversation around how we can share that and share more information around funding, how we can look at a better way of sharing around interim funding and criteria for interim funding. And I am in process of talking with some settings around that. We do have the majority of funding needs are for children with speech language communication needs. Is the greatest level that we have coming in, the greatest amount. And there's a little bit of information on the slides there regarding numbers of children. But early years high needs funding and early years SENIF funding is there. It comes under the band of high needs funding. It is there with the right evidence. Yeah. But interim and emergency funding is slightly different in the sense of, is it really an emergency? Where the child is in a life-threatening situation where they really cannot come in, for example, if they can't breathe without an adult support and so on, that's emergency funding, that's sort of interim funding. But we are looking at that criteria. So it is about settings and their reasonable adjustments, and what's reasonable under the graduated response, and what's high needs and the difference between the two. And that's a long-term conversation going forward with the sector. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for that clarity. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for everybody's input today. I do appreciate we've probably needed a bit more time on the agenda, so I'll make sure I gather that in for next time. And just to reiterate, if there are ever any agenda items you would like to see featured at the Early Years Partnership, this is your meeting. We put the agenda items together purely because, you know, we want to fill the time with useful information and discussion topics for you. But if you would like to lead an aspect of that or suggest an agenda item, please do come through to us. These meetings in future, although I absolutely will be involved, will be led more by the education leadership team in terms of funding, etc. Phil Curd will be taking all of that aspect on. But again, where there's expertise that's needed to make sure there's a smooth transition, I will certainly be involved. And obviously anything to do with curriculum provision, all of that, please do come through to me, Nikki and Joe, as I've described. But just take this opportunity to thanks everybody for coming out. again, taking time out of your early evening to be with us. Really appreciate it, especially, you know, Councillor Tessa Munt, who's come along. I really appreciate your presence here. Amelia, thanks for your contributions, and for everybody else, have a good night and see you all soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.